The Warlord's final sound wasn't a roar of defiance. It was a wet, confused gurgle. On the bridge of the dreadnought World Eater, the air smelled of burning chitin and copper. Sartok clawed at his throat, his four primary eyes darting wildly as the impossible happened. His armored carapace, material that could withstand plasma bombardment, was softening. It sloughed off his frame like wet paper. Around him, his bridge crew apex warriors bred in the hatching pits of Kragthar Prime were dissolving into puddles of organic sludge. There were no alarms blaring because the ship's bioneural circuitry had already died, infected by the same microscopic assassin that was currently liquefying the Warlord's internal organs. He looked at the tactical display, his vision blurring into red static. The human station sat there untouched, silent. They hadn't fired a single laser. They hadn't launched a single missile. They had simply opened a jar. Sartok fell to his knees, his legs giving way as the femur snapped under his own weight. He tried to comprehend the magnitude of his error, the sheer scale of the trap he had flown his entire armada into. He opened his mandibles to scream, to warn the rear guard, but his vocal cords had already been rewritten. All that came out was a hiss of black bile. But before the rot, before the silence, there was the arrogance. 6 hours earlier, Station Chimera was arguably the ugliest thing in the Sol system. It wasn't a gleaming spire of hope. It was a utilitarian aggressive slab of gray metal, a Stanford Taurus blown up to the size of a small moon, rotating slowly against the backdrop of Jupiter. It smelled of ozone, recycled coffee, and the faint, metallic tang of unwashed bodies working triple shifts. Dr. Elena Reyes stood on the command deck, watching the stars vanish. She didn't belong here. In a room full of starched navy blues and metals, she was a stain of stark white, a lab coat thrown over civilian clothes, her hair tied back in a messy bun that defied regulation. She held a mug of synthetic caffeine with both hands, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers. The sensors didn't ping. They screamed. A shadow fell over the station, physical and absolute. The Kragthar fleet didn't just arrive, they blotted out the universe. Thousands of ships dropped out of super cruise simultaneously, tearing a hole in the local physics with a sound that vibrated through the station's hull plates a deep, resonant thrum that rattled teeth and spilled coffee. These weren't elegant vessels. They were jagged shards of obsidian and biological waste, dripping with coolant that froze instantly in the vacuum. They looked like ticks, swollen and parasitic, clustered around the station as if preparing to burrow into its skin. Admiral Holloway, a man whose jawline was usually set in stone, looked pale. His hands gripped the railing of the holographic tank, knuckles turning white. His lizard brain was screaming at him to fire everything, to empty the magazines, to scream into the void. "Hold," Elena said. Her voice was soft, almost bored. It cut through the rising panic on the bridge like a scalpel. "They're locking weapons, Doctor," Holloway hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "Thermal spikes across the board. We are sitting ducks with the shields down." "We aren't ducks, Admiral. We're bait. Keep the shields down. Open the bay doors." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crew. The ops officer at the comms station turned, eyes wide. "Ma'am, they're hailing us. Wideband frequency. It's overriding our encryption." "Put it on screen," Elena ordered, taking a sip from her mug. "Let's see what the bugs have to say." The main view screen fractured into static before resolving into a high-definition nightmare. Warlord Zartok filled the frame. He was massive, a hulking insectoid nightmare of chitin and spikes. His mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that sounded like stones grinding in a crusher. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was dark, illuminated only by the pulsing red glow of their biotech interfaces. He didn't speak immediately. He leaned forward, the camera zooming in on his multifaceted eyes. He was studying them, assessing the prey. "Terrans," Yartok's voice was synthesized, translated by the computer into a flat, mechanical bass. But the mockery bled through. "We expected more." He reached off screen. A heavy thud echoed through the audio feed. He dragged someone into view. It was a human pilot, or what was left of one. Commander Vance, part of the patrol wing that had gone missing 3 days ago. His flight suit was shredded, his face a mask of bruises. He was alive, barely, his chest heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. The bridge crew of the Chimera froze. The air sucked out of the room. "You are soft," Zartok clicked, lifting Vance by the neck with a single clawed hand. The pilot dangled helplessly, feet kicking at the air. "Your shells are weak. You have no carapace. You break when squeezed." To demonstrate, Zartok squeezed. Vance didn't have the breath to scream. There was a wet snap, the sound of a dry branch breaking, and the pilot went limp. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She watched the monitor with the cold, detached intensity of a biologist observing a specimen in a petri dish. Her heart rate didn't spike. If anything, it slowed. She was counting. Zartok wasn't finished. In a display of brutality meant to shatter human resolve, he lifted the pilot's limp arm to his mandibles. He took a bite. The sound was hideous wet, crunching, grinding. The audio pickups on the alien ship were high fidelity. They caught the tearing of suit fabric and flesh. Several crew members on the Chimera bridge turned away, retching. Admiral Holloway looked like he was about to pass out, his face draining of blood until he was gray. Zartok swallowed, wiping a smear of red from his mouth. He laughed a chattering, high-pitched noise. "Surrender," the Warlord commanded. "Power down your reactors. Prepare your population for processing. We require larder for the hatching. You have 10 standard minutes before we board and begin the harvest. Do not resist. Your biology is pathetic. You exist only to be consumed." The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It pressed against the eardrums. Every eye on the bridge turned to Elena. They were waiting for the order to raise shields, to charge the railguns, to do something, anything, to avenge Vance. They wanted fire. They wanted rage. Elena set her coffee mug down on the tactical console. The ceramic click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Admiral," she said, her voice entirely devoid of emotion. Holloway looked at her, his eyes hollow. We have to return fire. We have to do something." "No," Elena said. She tapped a sequence into her datapad. "Seal the ventilation systems on all decks. Disengage the biofilters in the trade ports. And get me a secure line to the quarantine bolts." "Doctor!" Holloway blinked, confusion cutting through his shock. "What are you doing? We have 10 minutes before they slaughter us." Elena looked up. For the first time, there was something dangerous behind her eyes. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was the absolute certainty of a predator that had just watched a rabbit step into a snare. "He ate him," Elena said softly. "He actually ate him." "He's a monster," Holloway spat. "No," Elena corrected, a small, terrifying smile touching the corners of her mouth. "He's a vector." She turned to the tactical display, watching the thousands of red dots converging on their position. The Kragthar ships were moving in, docking tubes extending, expecting weeping victims and open doors. They were arrogant. They were hungry. And they had absolutely no idea that they had just introduced a variable into their digestive tracts that evolution had spent 4 billion years perfecting on Earth. "Let them get close," Elena whispered. "Let them get close enough to breathe on us." The timer on the main display bled red numbers into the dim command deck. 00, Dedi, 00, 5 non. 00, Dead A9. Holloway was vibrating. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the adrenaline toxicity of a man forced to stand still while a train barreled toward him. His stomach was a knot of cold iron. Around the bridge, the crew sat in paralyzed silence, their eyes locked on the encroaching hull of the World Eater. The alien flagship was so close now that the sensors were picking up the micro-vibrations of its waste pumps. "Doctor," Holloway croaked, "they're entering weapons range. If we don't raise shields, if you raise shields, they'll vaporize us in 4 seconds, Elena said, not looking up from her console. Her fingers flew across the haptic interface, decoupling safety protocols that hadn't been touched since the station was built. If we stay naked, they get curious. Curiosity buys time. Time buys infection. 001. The comms channel cracked open again. Zarntok didn't loom this time. He was leaning back in his command throne, a grotesque structure of bone and resin. He looked bored. He expected to see a bridge crew on their knees weeping for salvation. Instead, he saw Elena checking her fingernails. The Warlord's mandibles twitched. A low, clicking growl vibrated through the speakers. "You have not prepared the larder. You have not lowered your reactor cores." Elena finally looked up. Her expression was mild, almost apologetic, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow student. "Sorry, we were running a diagnostic." "Diagnostic?" Zarntok roared, heaving himself up. The motion was fluid, powerful. "Your time is dust. We will flay the skin from your diagnostic complete," Elena interrupted. She tapped the screen one final time. Incubation period confirming. Now. She stepped closer to the pickup, her face filling the alien Warlord's screen. "You made a mistake, Zarntok. You looked at our history and you saw wars. You saw nukes and kinetics. You thought we were primitives banging rocks together." "You are primitives," Zarntok spat. "True," Elena conceded. "But we're sick primitives. You see, 80 years ago, we found a ship. Not yours. Someone else's. Crashed in the ice. We studied it. We saw the armor plates that could bounce a railgun slug. We saw the shields that laughed at lasers." She paused, her voice dropping an octave. "We realized we couldn't beat you with physics. Your math is better than ours." On the Chimera Bridge, Holloway watched the doctor, his mouth slightly open. He had never heard this. "This was clearance level 0. So we stopped building guns," Elena said, her eyes dead flat. "And we started building cures." "Cures?" Zarntok clicked, confused. "You ate Commander Vance," Elena said. "You ingested raw biological material from a Class 4 death zone. Did you check for active cultures? Did you scan for dormant viral loads?" Zarntok hesitated. He felt a tickle at his throat, a small, insignificant irritation. He coughed a sharp hacking sound. "We weaponize the one thing you can't shield against," Elena whispered. "Biology." She slammed her hand down on the red execute key. Protocol Pandora ace active. There was no thunder of cannons. The station didn't shake with the recoil of a massive railgun. Instead, the cargo bay doors along the station's spine hissed open. To the naked eye, it looked like the station was venting steam. A massive, glittering cloud of silver particulate erupted into the void. It wasn't fire, it was a fog. It moved with a terrifying, fluid intelligence, propelled by micro-thrusters, swirling like a shoal of metallic fish. "What is this?" Zarntok demanded, the tickle in his throat becoming a burn. He scratched at his neck, his claws leaving white grooves in the chitin. "Plasma batteries! Fire!" The Kragthar fleet lit up the dark. Green bolts of plasma, hot enough to core a planet, slashed through the void. They passed harmlessly through the cloud. "You can't shoot a virus, you idiot," Holloway breathed, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. The cloud slammed into the World Eater. It didn't explode. It clung. The nanite virus hybrid, trillions of microscopic machines carrying a payload of weaponized necrotizing enzymes coated the hull. They sought out the heat vents, the exhaust ports, the airlocks. They swarmed into the intake manifolds, overriding the seals. On the alien bridge, the air quality monitors didn't register a threat until it was too late. The silver mist began to pour from the ventilation ducts, thick and heavy, smelling faintly of ozone and almonds. Zarntok stood up to order retreat, but his legs didn't work. "My legs," he wheezed. The cough was wet now, thick. "The nanites are rewriting you," Elena said, watching the telemetry on her screen. "They target the specific DNA sequence I uploaded. Yours." and anyone related to you, which, given your hive structure, is everyone. Zarndhawk looked at his hand. The hard black exoskeleton was turning gray. It was losing cohesion. He watched, horrified, as his own finger detached and fell to the deck with a soft plop, melting into a puddle of gray slurry. It targets the collagen bonds holding your cells together, Elena explained, taking a sip of her coffee. The normalcy of the action was horrifying against the backdrop of the massacre. It turns your immune system into a blender. You aren't dying, Zarndhawk. You're liquefying. Chaos erupted across the Kragthar fleet. Ships began to drift, without pilots to correct the drift. They collided. A frigate, spinning out of control, sheared the wing off a destroyer. There were no explosions, just the silent crunch of metal on metal. Inside the ships, the screaming started. It was a sound that defied description, a chorus of clicking, chittering shrieks that rapidly dissolved into wet gurgles. "Turn off the audio," Holloway said, turning away, his face green. "Leave it on," Elena ordered. "Record it. We need to send a copy to their home world." She watched the tactical map. The red dots were blinking out, not retreating, ceasing. Zarndhawk was on the floor now. He was a heap of melting armor and failing biology. He looked up at the screen, his vision swimming. The human female looked like a giant, a god of death in a white lab coat. "You monsters," he gurgled. "We survived the Black Death," Elena said. "We survived the Spanish flu. We survived Ebola. We built civilizations on top of graveyards. Zarndhawk, you thought we were weak because we bleed? We are the most infected things in the galaxy. You just broke the quarantine." The World Eater listed to the side. Its engines flared and died. "Deploy the sanitation wing," Elena said, turning to Holloway. The cold fire in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weary efficiency. "Clean up the mess." Holloway stared at her for a second, then nodded slowly. He keyed the mic. "Sanitation wing. Engage. Burn them. Burn them all." From the shadow of the station, the real human fleet emerged. They weren't warships. They were incinerators with engines. They moved toward the drifting, rotting hulks of the alien armada, their flamethrowers priming the vacuum with chemical fire. The void didn't carry sound, but the sanitation wing brought its own atmosphere. They fired chemical oxidizers, thick, gelatinous streams of fuel that clung to the drifting wreckage of the Kragthar fleet. In the vacuum, the fire burned a violent, unnatural violet, fed by internal oxygen supplies and the boiling gases of decomposing alien biology. It was a silent funeral pyre for 10,000 ships. On the bridge of Station Chimera, the cheering never started. There was no eruption of joy, no tossing of caps. There was only the wet sound of Holloway vomiting into a waste bin. The crew watched the screens in a daze. They had prepared to die fighting a hopeless battle against warriors. Instead, they had watched a nurse smother a patient. It was effective, it was absolute, and it was deeply, primitively wrong. Elena stood by the main viewport, her face illuminated by the purple strobe of the burning fleet. She looked tired. The manic energy of the predator was fading, replaced by the hollow exhaustion of the butcher. "We missed one," the ops officer whispered, his voice cracking. "Sector 4, a scout ship. It's shaking, ma'am. It's not moving." "On screen," Elena said. She didn't turn around. The scout ship appeared. It was small, unarmed, likely a courier vessel. It sat motionless in the dark, surrounded by the burning carcasses of its dreadnoughts. "Hail them," Elena ordered. "Doctor," Holloway wiped his mouth, standing up shakily. "Let it go. They're broken. Just let them run." "No," Elena said. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly. "Survivors breed hope. I need a witness." The channel opened. The alien pilot didn't speak. It was huddled in the corner of its cockpit, pressing itself against the bulkhead as far away from the console as possible. It was hyperventilating, a rapid clicking intake of air. It had watched its God King dissolve. It had watched its armada turn into soup. Elena leaned into the mic. She didn't shout. She used the soft, soothing tone of a mother telling a child to check under the bed. "Go home," she said. The alien flinched at the sound of her voice. "Take the recording of this battle," Elena continued. "Take the medical data of what happened to your warlord. Show it to your hatching queens. Show it to your generals." She tapped a command on her console, uploading a packet to the scout ship's computer. "I have sent you the coordinates for Earth," she lied. The coordinates were actually for the center of the sun, but the threat was what mattered. "I want you to mark a 10-light-year radius around this system. Label it quarantine. If we see one more shit military, civilian, or lost, I will not release the virus on a fleet. I will drop a single canister on your homeworld." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it snapped. "I will rewrite your entire species into algae. Do you understand?" The alien pilot scrambled for the controls, tripping over its own limbs in a frantic, blind panic. The scout ship's engines flared, white-hot, and it vanished into hyperspace, tearing a hole in the dark to get away from the monster in the white coat. "End transmission," Elena said. She picked up her coffee mug. It was cold. She drank it anyway. 1 year later, Station Chimera had changed. It was no longer just a gay house. It was a shrine to the concept of don't touch. The trade lanes were open, but the traffic was different. Alien freighters, species that had once looked at humanity as potential slave labor or resource nodes, now approached the Sol system with the trembling reverence of bomb disposal technicians. They didn't dock. They transferred cargo via automated drones at the extreme edge of the system. When diplomatic envoys were forced to meet with human representatives, they wore full-body environmental isolation suits. They didn't fear human guns. They didn't fear human ships. They feared human breath. Humanity had not become the noble guardians of the galaxy. We had become the lepers with the shotgun. We were the Death Worlders, the biological anomaly that weaponized nature itself. Peace had not been won with honor. It had been purchased with a nightmare. Elena sat in her office, deep in the bowels of the station's science wing. The room was dark, lit only by the blue glow of a stasis field generator on her desk. Holloway stood in the doorway. He had been promoted to Grand Admiral, but he looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened into canyons. He rarely visited this deck. The air down here felt heavy to him, laden with ghosts. "The Galactic Council accepted the treaty," Holloway said. He didn't step into the room. "They're establishing a demilitarized zone. We're safe, Elena. You did it." Elena didn't look up. She was staring at the object floating in the stasis field. It was a single glass vial. Inside, a suspended globule of the Kragthar DNA, or what it had become, swirled in a slow, hypnotic spiral. "Did I?" she asked. "We're alive," Holloway said, trying to convince himself. "That's what matters. We survived." "The virus mutated," Elena said softly. Holloway froze. The blood drained from his face. "What?" "During the attack on the World Eater," she explained, her voice detached, clinical. "The nanites interacted with the Kragtar's regenerative enzymes. They adapted. They learned." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired, rimmed with red. There was no triumph in them, only the cold, hard math of a woman who had looked into the abyss and realized the abyss was scared of her. "It's not just specific to them anymore, Admiral. The strain in this vial, it breaks down carbon bonds. Universal application, Kragthar, Falcon, human. It doesn't care. It eats everything." Holloway took a step back, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm, then stopping. "Destroy it. Incinerate it now." "I can't," Elena said. "Why the hell not?" Holloway's voice rose to a shout. "The war is over." "Is it?" Elena tapped the glass of the stasis field. "They fear us because they think we are crazy. They think we are reckless. But eventually they will forget. They will get brave. They will come back with hazmat suits and robotic soldiers." She unlocked a drawer and placed the vial inside, next to a picture of her daughter, the daughter who had died of a fever 3 years ago, the daughter whose memory had built this weapon. "I'm keeping it, Admiral," Elena said, closing the drawer with a final heavy click. "Because we aren't the heroes of this story, we're the monsters under the bed, and monsters need to keep their teeth sharp." Howe looked at her and realized for the first time that the doctor scared him more than the alien warlord ever had. The warlord had wanted to conquer them. Elena was willing to unmake existence to save it. He turned and walked away, the sound of his boots echoing down the empty corridor. Elena remained alone in the dark. She touched the drawer handle one last time, her hand steady, her pulse slow. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, safe, silent, and terrified.